Good morning, everybody. This is a webinar on refresher training, or for some of you who have never seen this before, it'll be a lot of great new information. And we're talking about stormwater compliance and BMPs for construction sites here in Northern Nevada. We've got quite a number of you folks, and I'll be monitoring to just make sure that if you guys have questions, we can answer them. You can raise your hand by clicking that button, and if I don't see what's going on, maybe a few of our other panelists can help you. I'll answer a quick question. Yes, there is a recording available for this, definitely, and yeah, what other questions might there be at this moment? Thank you, Chris. All right. Well, yeah. Welcome everybody. We've got a really good session here of learning, and I want to just emphasize that this can be an interactive presentation, and I'll just point out that the first part of the presentation is going to be a background on stormwater regulation and the history of how we got to this point in regulation, the importance of what we're doing, and a little bit on permitting. And then we'll have a break. We'll have 10-minute breaks every 45 minutes, hour or so. And then we'll move on to the second presentation, which is really going to get into the nitty-gritty of BMPs, SWIPs, and how to fill out all of the NOI and NOT information. So that will be a really good time to be interactive more during the second presentation there. So I'll introduce myself before I forget to. My name is Daniel Moss, and I am a project coordinator here at the City of Reno, and up on the 7th floor in City Hall here. And in my position, I help administer, among many things, I do a lot of engineering review on stormwater, but I also help administer the Truckee Meadows Stormwater Permit Coordinating Committee, which you can see in the corner there. That's our new logo. And I'll explain about what that committee is more in the future, but it's all things stormwater as required by the state of Nevada. I personally, I have a background in civil environmental engineering. I used to work for Manhart Consulting. I worked for JK Architecture Engineering downtown as well. And before that, I have experience being an inspector down in the state of Arizona and doing a lot of hydrology related work. So it's great to now work for the city and see things from this perspective and work from this side of the government. So that's a quick introduction of myself, and I'm going to let the other presenters now introduce themselves. So Chris, would you like to go for it?
Oh, sure. Hey, good morning. My name is Chris Gravenstein. I see some familiar names out there, so it's good to see out there, and looking forward to meeting some of the new ones. But I currently work for the City of Reno as an environmental control officer. So we oversee our city's pre-treatment program, but also we have direct enforcement capabilities for stormwater related activities under Municipal Code 1216. My previous position was where our other two panelists are from, NDEP. I was one of the only two construction stormwater inspectors for the whole state. My counterpart out of Las Vegas was doing Clark County, and then I was pretty much assigned outside of Clark. So I was pretty busy, and I also implemented or inspected the industrial stormwater and mining stormwater permits throughout the state. So it's nice to see my coworkers, old coworkers, teaming up with a few of them and tackling the state. Other than that, that's really all I have as far as my background. I learned most of my environmental stuff after college when I got onto NDEP, and I've been loving it ever since. I started doing that in 2011, and 10 years later, here I am doing it at a different level. But looking forward to the presentation today. Thanks, Daniel.
Chris, thank you, Chris. All right, Christy, how about you?
Hi, I'm Christy. I'm one of the Northern Nevada Stormwater Inspectors. Michelle is my counterpart up here. I started working at NDEP about 4 years ago. Chris was actually the one who trained me. So if you don't like my style, you can blame him. My background is I have undergrad in chemistry and a master's in environmental chemistry. And then I started working out of the state after I got my master's degree. Just been working at the state and helping do inspections, and recently helped write the new construction stormwater permit, which will be coming out shortly. There will be more information about that as it comes around. Still hasn't gone to EPA yet, still hasn't gone out to public notice, so we still have a ways in it, but it's coming through soon. So
Michelle?
I'm Michelle, Christy's coworker. Like she said, we cover all of Northern Nevada. We have a bit more inspectors now since Chris was here. We have 4 inspectors full-time for the state, so 2 in Vegas, and Christy and I for basically the rest of the state. I have a bachelor's in chemistry and a master's in inorganic chemistry, and I started working for NDEP 6 years ago. I was originally in laboratory certification and then moved over to stormwater 3 years ago. So just doing inspections. We inspect the industrial, also known as the multi-sector general permit now, construction and mining. So.
All right. And, later in the presentation, if we have time, we probably will. There'll be some opportunities for other folks to introduce themselves. Of course, there's going to be Q&A panels for anybody to speak, but there's quite a few inspectors on this call, and that's really important. And so we'll have other folks introduce themselves later in the presentation as we move on. But why don't we get started here? Hope everybody has their coffee. Yep. Yeah, let's get started on the background here. So again, this first 45 minutes or so, we're going to be talking about the history of stormwater protection. We're talking about what we're protecting, the bodies of water around here. We'll be talking about the types of pollutants and the issues that we see most commonly in the storm sewers, and of course, who benefits? Everybody. And then I'll be briefly touching the stormwater permit elements before we go into further details in the next presentation. Well, here we are. Let's talk about some history. Who hasn't heard of the Cuyahoga River burning? This is a very famous photo, and we're going to go back in time for just a moment. This is the Cuyahoga River in Ohio, which flows into the Great Lakes. And we don't see things this bad anymore, but this river caught on fire really badly in 1952, causing $1 million worth of damage, and obviously huge amounts of environmental pollution. But in truth, that river had caught on fire something like a dozen times before this photo was taken. So it's important to know that with all sort of regulation and all sort of environmental protection, things can happen slowly. And so, so here's this disaster on the left. On the right, that's a big oil spill that occurred in, believe 1969 in Santa Barbara. And you can see hundreds of workers cleaning up incredible amounts of oil and pollution. And it really sort of put the environmental issue on the map for so many people who, you know, enjoyed their beautiful beaches and then saw something like this happen. So what am I getting at? Well, these sort of disasters led to the creation of the EPA. So here's President Nixon doing the big moment. EPA was created in 1970 as, you know, a reaction to a lot of these major environmental catastrophes, really. And very soon after that, in 1972, the Clean Water Act was passed. And this is really the source of where a lot of these rules and regulations came from. And, you know, I'll point out that in 1970, this is also when like the Vietnam War started to move out of the headlines. And so there was just a huge amount of attention in the headlines. And then when the when the EPA was created, it really started to bring things into light. So, you know, we've got some black and white photos here, but I'm just gonna bring this to today, which is that we do have to be really grateful for a lot of these regulations for helping create beautiful and preserve beautiful parts of the American landscape, like this beautiful picture here of Lake Tahoe, most famous lake in the world, in my opinion. And that's where we're working. That's what we're talking about today. We all live in Northern Nevada, and we're in the Truckee Meadows region of the Truckee watershed. And this is a great illustration of just how much water contributes to the Truckee River. Starts in Tahoe and it ends in the terminal lake of Pyramid Lake, which is a pretty rare occurrence to have a terminal river the size of Truckee, as opposed to something that just flows into the ocean. It's not a very common occurrence. So let's move through these little animations here. The EPA created the national CWA and NIPDES, the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. And let's draw that over to Nevada. So here in Nevada, we have the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection, and we have our stormwater permitting program. And there's three major types of permits. We have the industrial general permit, which is now regulating a huge number of industrial sites in Nevada, and I'm sure that number has gone way up since this presentation was first created. And then we have what what I focus on mostly is the MS4 permit, Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. So separate from the sewer discharge from wastewater from your home is the stormwater system. And then we have the construction general permit. And we'll be mostly focusing here on the construction general permit and how those regulations apply. I'll just quickly point out though that with the MS4 permits, there's only 3 large ones in the state, and the committee that I am a part of, SWPCC, is one of the 3. There's Truckee Meadows, which is our permitting committee, and then there's NDOT, which has its own separate permit throughout the state, and then there's Las Vegas Valley. So real quick about our committee, this is a joint effort between all the 3 governing bodies here in Truckee Meadows. We got the city of Reno, we got Washoe County, and we have Sparks. And depending on where your construction site is, you're going to be working with the permitting system and the inspectors of that jurisdiction. So it's important to know that we're all working together. There's a lot of communication between us. And I'll point out that the city of Reno is the lead agency. So we do a lot of the legwork as the funding came in our direction to lead this. I'll just give a quick pointer to Nevada Department of Transportation. They're a regional stormwater partner in the Truckee Meadows, so they operate their own MS4 permit. And it's important to remember, you might want to write this down, that work within the NDOT right-of-way has to be coordinated with NDOT for their own stormwater requirements. So what are we here for? Well, the stormwater program goal. We're improving water quality from stormwater discharges so citizens can enjoy water bodies for the beneficial uses of drinking water. This is a huge one. We have technology to clean drinking water, but it's expensive. So the cleaner the water is that we have to treat, the less expensive it is to do it. Recreation, this is huge. Who likes going hiking on the Truckee? Who likes boating or rafting or fishing for that matter? It's really, a lot of people think that the Truckee River is, the crown jewel of this area. And it's just a huge component to a lot of people's lives. So, so very important to protect it. Agriculture. I'll just point out that that Lake Tahoe is a beautiful natural lake, but as of about 100 years ago, it was dammed to a height of 17 feet maximum. So, well, the dam is 17 feet tall, and that frees up 730,000 acre feet of water every year, which is a ton of water, which a huge amount of it goes to agriculture. So the Lahontan Valley down over to the south, more like the southeast, that is in large part irrigated by a huge amount of Truckee River water. So let's not forget that agriculture needs clean water, and they use a lot of it. And then, of course, wildlife. Kudos to Chris for capturing this incredible shot. It's clear that wildlife is all over the river. Anything from a deer to little tiny macroinvertebrates that really help the whole ecosystem go around. So that is a huge component of why we're protecting this water. So what are we protecting it from? We're protecting water resources from potential pollutants such as, there's your oil and grease stain. That's a pretty nasty one. Then we have sediment. Chris will be going into a lot of detail about why an image like this is wrong. What's wrong in this image? But sediment, total dissolved solids and total suspended solids, is the #1 pollutant of water in the United States from human causes. So keep that in mind. We're protecting it from industrial activities. So this is some sort of used oil processing facility, and I see quite a few issues. The industrial permit would not necessarily, wouldn't approve this site at this moment. What else? We're protecting from food and waste. Now, food waste. Let me just check and see if that chat is going on. All right, I do get distracted by the chat, but I'll move on here. So this is a strange picture. I don't know how many food processing facilities are in the city that look this bad. So I'll just point out, we'll cover this up if you're eating anything. Yeah, I'll point out that this is a much more common form of food waste that we are protecting from, which is your very conventional wash sink in a restaurant, of which there are a million here in Truckee Meadows, and the grease trap that all restaurants and food processing facilities are required to have to keep the grease and the solids out of our sewer system. So, but there's also a lot of pretreatment related to storm water in relation to food facilities. So like mat washing and keeping surface water, polluted surface water out of the storm drain. Animal waste. Well, we don't have too many feedlots right here in the Truckee Meadows, but there are some within the Truckee River watershed. And again, this isn't an image we see too often. What we do see a lot more often of are dogs and people's pets. We love them, and there are a lot of dogs and right here in Truckee Meadows. And this is a picture of a dog waste bag station put on by the Truckee Meadows Parks Foundation. I hope you all know where your local dog bag station is, because in reality, dog waste, the fecal coliform from that is a significant pollutant to local creeks and rivers, local creeks that flow into rivers. So that's a big part of what we're protecting from. And then we've got illicit discharges. And these ones are not fun. I don't know what this chemical is, but if you ever look down into a drainage ditch or near a construction site and you saw some foul colored water, that water is not going to go anywhere but the river. It's going to, unless it can get immediately cleaned and remediated, those chemicals will be stuck in the watershed for a long, long time. So that is the final component of what we're protecting from. And just as a refresher, this is a great illustration, speaks for itself, of what the difference is between the storm drains and the sewer system. The main difference is that the storm water is not treated. We don't have, it would be financially and technically impossible to treat all that storm water. And so whatever goes down the drain ends up right in the river. And unlike the sewer system, where we spend a lot of money and resources to clean our wastewater that gets released into the beautiful Truckee River. So this is a picture from Seattle. I didn't create this slide here, but it does show a really bad discharge of stormwater entering tributary to, I think it's an estuary part of Seattle. So this is what you see when you see all the brown polluted water. But what you don't see is this. There are just a huge amount of chemicals and pollutants and metals that and E. coli's that are contained in that typical brown stormwater discharge that you see. So I'm not going to list all of them, but these are chemicals that you'll find both in stormwater and in sewage. And the sewer treatment plants are incredible at removing a lot of these contaminants. But again, stormwater, it's not going to remove any of it. So let's talk a little bit more about sediment pollution. It's just dirt. So, you know, what's the big deal? And the reality is it's the most common pollutant in rivers, streams, lakes, and reservoirs within, you know, in the United States. And there's a statistic that says that we account for 70% of erosion and sediment transport when it comes to those, when it comes to this type of pollution. Just for a moment, I'm going to check my chat, see if I can get this more easily visible for me. Yeah, so you know, what really is the issue with sediment pollution? There's a lot of words on this slide. I apologize for that, but you know, let's first talk about the animals. Sediment pollution, and if consistently exposed to sediment, fish, their lungs can be clogged, and it can kill animals or really hamper their ability to survive and thrive and grow. So, you know, that's going to affect all of our fishermen out there and all the animals that rely on fish. And then let's go to the smaller scale, you know, all the insects, the mayflies, the minnows, and all the hundreds of macroinvertebrates that rely on clean water to survive. A huge number of them can die or really suffer in population when exposed to too much sediment. And then, yeah, it can smother spawning grounds for fish. So hence why we have to often stock a river to make sure that fish are actually available. It also deters vegetation growth and, you know, blocks the sunlight. And so, you know, the impacts to the vegetation, to the environment are pretty obvious. But when it comes to infrastructure, this picture below is kind of an innocuous situation, but sediment buildup in culverts can really become an expensive issue, not only to maintain the culvert, but if sediment builds up to the extent that it's completely clogging the culvert or actually, completely clogging it, you can get major flooding. You can actually, you know, you get major flooding, which can cause further damage to public facilities, private facilities, and this all can be very expensive. And then, as I mentioned earlier, water treatment costs. You know, the more cloudy the water is that the Chalk Bluff water treatment plant has to treat, then the more expensive it is for taxpayers. So the other thing I'll point out, and yeah, this is the time to talk about it. The other thing I'll point out is that sediment is where contaminants can glom onto. So heavy metals are a lot more available to be uptaken into a fish or into an animal if it's in a bioavailable form, which is oftentimes associated with sediment. And so it not only can be more easily uptaken, but it spreads much further downstream. Whatever type of contaminant it is likes to stick to those clays and silts that create sediment runoff. And then, of course, who wants to swim in a dirty river or a dirty lake? So it's not pleasant for recreation. I think I've explained why we care in about a million ways, but I'll just point out that Nevada is actually one of the driest state in the country, and it also has a very rapidly growing population. And so this is an important reason to kind of think about water in a special way, and to honor the water that we do have here in the state, because I think everybody knows it's not going to come from rain very often. You know, it's all based on the snowpack and flows down from the Truckee River, from Lake Tahoe. So it's good to point out that we all live downstream. You know, there's always going to be somebody downstream from you. And imagine if somebody were upstream from you polluting. I'm using you a lot, but the reality is that we're all part of this, and we all rely on 80% on the water, because 80% of Truckee Meadows water drinking water comes from the Truckee River, and that number fluctuates based on the small amount of groundwater pumping that we'll do in other parts of the Truckee Meadows area. And it's important to remember that, you know, that groundwater and surface water are connected. So a septic system that isn't processing correctly and is near a river is definitely going to impact surface water quality. And yeah, this is basic illustration of our watershed, but it's important to know that even Spanish Springs, way up north, is part of our watershed, and that water ends up in the river relatively quickly after a storm. So just a couple of, you know, facility names to go over here. The Truckee River being the source of our drinking water. It gets treated at Chalk Bluff Water Treatment Plant, which is over off McCarran. And then after it goes through all the sewer systems, goes through our showers, our toilets, and then back through sewer pipes, it's going to end up at Tum Wharf, the Truckee Meadows Water Reclamation Facility. Up north, we have Riz Wharf, the Reno Stead Water Reclamation Facility. And then just pointing out that the river, the sewer treatment plant, is a point source form of pollution, or a point source form of contribution to the water system, to the Truckee. But then there's a huge amount of non-point source pollution, and so that's drainage from our tributaries, our creeks, and which drain from our urban runoff. And a colleague of mine who works, Carrie Jensen, who does a lot of presentations on water quality, she pointed out that the typical curb and gutter that you see on the side of the road, that is technically a creek. It doesn't have fish in it, really. It doesn't have plants and rocks and birds, but it's a creek. And just because it's dry doesn't mean that whatever's in that creek is not going to be flushed down. So, you know, those curbs and gutters are creeks, and they provide an impervious surface for water to flow down to the river. Again, the Truckee Meadows area, it's the largest urbanized section along the river, and that's why our MS4 permit is, you know, closely monitored and managed, and so so much of our day-to-day operations at the county and the Sparks and Reno are driven by this one permit here. And another technical term here, the stormwater management plan is something that our committee, the 3 entities, have created to address the MS4 permit and to explain to the state how we're actually doing our part to protect water quality. So TMDLs, total maximum daily load. This is the technical aspect of the MS4 permit that requires us to follow these regulations. So total maximum daily load is the total amount of pollution from the background source, from point sources, and on the left you'll see the that's the discharge from the sewer treatment plant, and also background levels. So whatever the background is that already is in the water is accounted for in those calculations, so that we're not, you know, overly regulating. Yeah, it speaks for itself. So we're not over regulating that TMDL. Total phosphorus, total nitrogen, and total dissolved solids are the 3 TMDLs, and these are the, you know, the highest quantities in pounds that are regulated, and they're easily measurable. And let's just I'll show you some numbers here, just so you can see what our MS4 permit says. This is from our swamp. And, you know, these numbers are big. So let's see. In terms of the TMDL of nitrogen is from one part of the city is, you know, 33 pounds per day. But in reality, if you look at some of these hydrograph storms, if you look at the monitoring that we do from storm totals, a small storm, like a 1/4 inch storm, will create, I don't have the numbers, but it will create pounds of sediment discharge every day. And so that number is consistently met on bad storm days. Again, we have rivers, creeks, and ditches that need to be protected, lakes, wetlands, lands draining to these surface waters, and groundwater resources. So again, you know, this is just the basic slide showing all the aspects of the MS4, the municipal separate sewer system. We have inlets, pipes, ditches, curbs and gutters, streets, channels, conveyances. And it's important to just think about all of those curb and gutter and streets. They're creeks, essentially. All right, so finally, we're getting near the end of our presentation. I'll be talking about the elements of our MS4 permit. And this is again what the Stormwater Permitting Coordination Committee helps administer. We have construction activities, we have municipal operations, we have land use planning, illicit discharge detection and elimination, which I'll point out, Chris Gravenstein is our kind of our go-to guy for within the city, at least. Monitoring, so we do a lot of monitoring on the river and on tributaries to see trouble areas. Structural controls and public outreach and education. So we'll go through some nice photos here. This is some pictures from the Corp Yard, the City of Reno Corp Yard, as well as out in the field. This is a group of people doing a cleanup of the storm drain, probably removing a huge bunch of trash, leaves, sand from a catch basin on a busy intersection. And so they're out there working a lot to keep our storm drains clean and free from flooding risk. All right, then we have industrial stormwater management at industrial sites. So, every industrial site, not to be confused with a construction site, but an industrial site with ongoing industrial business operations, whether that's a sand mine or a metal plater or a wash, an industrial laundry, which we have a couple of those here in the city. These are all monitored and covered under the industrial discharge permit, and they are monitored by environmental control staff, and they're inspected on a semi-annual basis, and their permits are updated and reviewed on a regular basis. I think I'm not going to go into every whether it's biannual or annual, but I'll let Chris talk about that when he is speaking. So then we have construction sites, and that's what we're going to be focusing on later at the second part of the presentation, and we'll have some good conversations about some of the photos that you're seeing right here, but let's talk about that later. This is just, I'm trying to show this image more often than not. This is our field guide for construction site best management practices, which is what we think your best friend on the construction site. Whenever there's an issue, you can always refer to this. And then we've got our IDDE. These are some pretty nasty ones. What causes white water? It could be a wide variety of things, but even something as simple as tile cutting. Tile cuttings create huge amounts of very fine particulates that are whatever the color of the tile, usually white, and real gross nuisance when it dries up in a creek or a tributary or gets into the river. And then lower left, you'll see something that unfortunately we see more often than we'd like to think about. But there's a lot of illegal discharge of just human waste and human pollution into storm drains. And again, we have a team of people out there who do everything they can to keep that to a minimum. Right, Chris? All right.
Yeah, it's a real big problem here. I've been tasked with dealing with a lot of the homeless encampments, and unfortunately, I see that picture way too often. It's pretty gross.
Well, we're doing something about it. So, this is just a funny slide. Essentially, what we're saying is with a proper, effective implementation of IDDE, enforcement happens, and we stop as many perpetrators of this as possible. And there's another slide later on that we'll be talking about how to report issues that you might see either in your neighborhood or in town of illicit discharges, and how to report that and help us get the problem solved. Sorry. So I'll just point out here that another part that the MS4 permit covers is regulations and encouragement of effective stormwater management in redevelopment practices. So, and in new development. And so that's when we start talking about low impact development, LID, and proper stormwater management to keep dirty water out of to keep it out of our storm drains. And I'm not sure what these Jensen precasts, what site this is, but I'm sure that this is a in situ stormwater treatment system that doesn't have to be manned. It's self-operational. And then here at Cabela's, this is a great example of an LID curb cut where the water is encouraged to stay on site and to infiltrate into this little landscaping feature instead of running off the site. I'll point out, we'll talk about this a little bit, but I'll point out that there's an LID presentation coming up put on by Cardno, and that's going to be really good. And if you want to know more about that, please email me, because we'll be learning a lot about the details of LID design. And then finally here, public education and outreach. It's a big part of what we do, a big part of what I do with the committee. If you've ever walked down the street and seen the no dumping drains to the river with that big old salmon on it, that is most likely a child or a family from a volunteer event actually stenciled that, spray painted that onto the sidewalk. That's a big event that we hold every year or twice a year, mostly in conjunction with Keep Truckee Meadows Beautiful, great community cleanup. So if you ever see the opportunity to use some stenciling, or if you see the opportunity to mark up a neighborhood, let me know. But we do have maps that show us what needs to be marked. So that's just one aspect of our education. We encourage other entities, nonprofits to do education for kids and in classrooms. And here, this is a fun little art competition for beautifying our storm drains. That looks to be like a goldfish. So that's a big part of what we do. And then, oh yeah, as part of that, we're releasing, this is a sneak peek, but we're releasing a trifold educational pamphlet. That's the front, that's the back. We'll be sending these out in the mail, as well as having them at various events and various offices that you can just grab. And it's a fun little pamphlet on how you as an individual can prevent stormwater pollution. And right there on the left side, you can see how to report issues that you observe. And we've got another slide just devoted for that later on. Finally, I keep forgetting, there's always one more slide. Monitoring analysis. This is a big part of what we do. We have a couple of great companies working for us. We have partnerships with USGS, but also Balance Hydraulics out of Truckee will come down and do monitoring during major storm events, minor storm events, and also doing background monitoring on the chemicals and pollution that we observe in our water quality, in our storm drain systems. And every year a report is compiled and trends are analyzed to see what tributaries might be bigger issues than others, and to kind of track our progress and see how things are improving over time. So with that, this is the end of our introductory presentation. I hope you still got some coffee left for the next one, but I just wanted to thank you for sitting through that first part. And if you have any questions, now is a great time to ask it. I'm going to try and find the comments here to see if anybody wants to raise their hand or whatnot. Yeah, if there's no questions or comments at this moment, I'll give you guys a few more seconds to think of anything, but if not, we'll go into a 10-minute break just so you can take a stretch break. Yeah, a 10